We were actually near you a few weeks ago. We were in Illinois at this church, and during worship, it sounded like a helicopter was landing on the building. And so I mentally thought, oh, it must be a train or something. And then some of the other leaders ran out the front door of the building and they were like, hey, where's the helicopter? And the people walking down the street were like, yeah, there's no helicopter here. So this amazing sound from heaven began to fill the building, so much so that you could feel the building begin to vibrate. And that was a unique thing. I'm not going to say it's me and Alicia. It's amazing when kingdom family gathers together, how the elements themselves begin to respond.
It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is David Edwards, and we're going to depart from our normal format of doing an interview specifically about a book and have more of a free-flowing conversation about David's work and ministry. So we're going to see where the Spirit leads us. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, I'm really honored to be on here. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let's kick off our conversation today with a bit of what we might call the David Edwards origin story. So for the listeners encountering you for the first time in our conversation today, what are a few things they should know about you?
David Edwards, my good friends call me Dave, but, figure that out.
Someday I will call you Dave.
Yes. When you get into that inner circle, you're very close. Just a few more burpees and you'll be there, or a few more miles. Been married, I better get this right, 19 years to my amazing wife, Alicia. We live down here in Atlanta, Georgia. It's kind of our home, lived in the Southeast a lot. My origin story, I got radically saved when I was 16 years old. I was a skateboarder, and then my friend Damien invited me to go to this punk rock ska show, which is like punk rock music mixed with instruments in big band. And after the show, he said, hey, do you want to come to my youth group? And I said, are the same girls that went to the show going to be at the youth group? He said, yeah. I said, all right, I'll go check that out. And then over a period of a couple of months, I just kept going. And then something in my heart was being drawn in. I remember very distinctly one day the youth pastor said, not only would Jesus wash the disciples' feet, he would wash your feet. All of a sudden, Jesus went from this big guy in the sky I was kind of scared of to someone that was personal and washing the filth out of my life. So from that moment, just on fire for Jesus, like I was reading the Bible, not because someone told me, but because I was hungry. I would pray every night for hours and hours, not because I was trying to be spiritual. I couldn't stop praying until I got closer to him. The Brownsville Revival started and began to really impact our youth group. So we drive for hours and hours and hours to different places to hang out with kids just to watch a VHS from the Brownsville Revival. So I ended up going to school down there for a couple of years. And really amazing impact in my life. Straight from ministry school, we went to Africa to do the whole mission thing. But we've just been burning for revival ever since, just to really see God touch our generation in amazing supernatural ways. We have a passion to raise up revivalists. And for us, that looks like kingdom family, sons and daughters, mothers and fathers doing life together. So everywhere we go and the things that we release on YouTube or books where we share, we're just releasing kingdom family, but a lot of times that's accompanied with God moving in incredible supernatural ways.
Well, in terms of your spiritual formation, spiritual development, I'm curious to hear what aspects of, say, the supernatural broke through in your life at what stages? Because I feel like that's a different journey for every person. As I would like to say, as we go further down the Spirit-empowered, the Holy Spirit rabbit hole, God gives us what we can handle as we're growing along the journey. What were those things that you first saw breaking through in your life?
Right when I got saved, it was in the Church of God. So it was Pentecostal background, and God was moving, And I started hearing about this thing called speaking in tongues. I didn't really have a grid for that. That was kind of weird. It kind of challenged me a little bit. But from what I could see is that the people who are the most passionate about God were operating in this gift. And simultaneous to that, I didn't know, I didn't have a grid for anything. So I just, because I was now saved and in love with Jesus, I began watching Christian TV, and I found Benny Hinn on TV. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I would see people get healed. I would see the Spirit come in and touch people in his meetings. I would see the wind blow through the meetings. And so I began to have this hunger to experience those same things in my life. And so I began to feel like we would have these different youth retreats and things like that, where the Spirit of the God would come in and do amazing things. And I remember like going up to the altar for the first time and someone laying hands on me. I'm almost 100% sure. As soon as he touched me, I almost like jumped back into the water. Like, I don't know if what knocked me down. It was just like, yes, finally. And I fell down. Next hour and a half, I couldn't move. I had these open-eyed visions of the Spirit of God kind of coming in and coming out of me. And I saw like this, the Spirit looked like a living life force, kind of like this blue glory going inside of my body. And I saw these dark things begin to leave. And after an hour and a half of that, I sat up. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm drunk. And I had no grid. No one taught me that language. Like, I didn't know that that was something that people often said. And as I said that, I fell right on my face. So fast forward a few months, I'm finishing one of Benny Hinn's books because I was in high school sitting out in the hallway because I missed a test. They're like, you weren't here. You can't hear what's happening. So I sat out in the hallway. I finished the last page of that book. And as I shut it, all of a sudden, I felt the Spirit of God just began to flow out of me right there in school. And I had no idea what was happening, and I couldn't stop it. So I went and sat back down at my desk with my head down, like praying in tongues as I walked out. So those couple of experiences mixed with a really dear friend of mine named Brandon Weaver, who he prayed in tongues. You get around him, you could feel the presence of God. You could feel the Spirit of God. And seeing what was happening at Brownsville, we just became really, really hungry to see God move in supernatural ways. And a lot of times you hear people say, well, don't seek his hand, seek his face. Well, for me, it's connected, right? It's the same person. So I just began to get passionate about experiencing God in the elements. I wanted to feel the wind blow. I read about it in the Bible. I saw it happening in my generation. Then I began to read stories about it in church history. It was a 15-year journey before I actually felt it. But almost every single time, even now, when I put my hands out, I can feel the winds of God just begin to swirl around. So it's something to where some things early on, I got to experience the falling, the shaking, praying in the Spirit, even some prophetic stuff. But then some of the other things, it's like the longer I waited, the more hungry I got for it. And then finally, I guess somehow just when I wasn't expecting it, all of a sudden we reached the end of the fuse and it began to explode around us. And it ties into our Papa Leif Hetland kind of taking us in as sons and daughters, I think, and everything coming full circle. Hopefully some of that answered your question.
That was perfect. That was a great ending to your origin story. I like what you shared in the sense that, until you experience these things for yourself, you really don't understand. I mean, you can see things, say, in a Darren Wilson video, you can read about them in a book, but you're just this outsider kind of looking through a window and you're like, that's kind of weird and different. And it's crazy the shift that happens all of a sudden when you're hit with those things. You fall out, you're shaking, you're feeling the presence of God. It's almost like a light bulb comes on. You're like, oh, this is what I saw. This is what I was reading about. And I feel like when that happens, you can't look at the Bible. You can't look at anything the same way again because you're just understanding things. I feel like your experience catches up with your knowledge. You see something, you read something, your knowledge is here. And then when you get hit with that same thing, you're like, oh, that's what that is. And so love what you shared. That was very helpful.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback real quick, for me, the Bible is an invitation for these stories. It's not like I go to the grocery store and get all this food and just put it in my refrigerator and then look at it. Like you said, it's an invitation to meet Jesus. It's a two-dimensional story of a three-dimensional person who has revealed to us a four-dimensional world. And for me, that's just kind of the kicker of why I just, as you said, kept going. It wasn't enough for me to hear about Elijah experience heaven on earth. I was like, oh, wait, that's an invitation. I want to experience that myself. Some of it was quick. Some of it took years. There was this constant thing of, I know we're created to experience God in supernatural ways. And even now, I'm so hungry, not because I'm starving, but because I've eaten some and I know there's more.
Let's transition into a discussion about your YouTube channel. You and I are both content creators and have spent time in the podcasting and YouTube world, as you might say. Talk to us about the range of content that you're putting out there. You're doing both teaching, you're interviewing other authors and leaders. Would love to hear about just kind of your vision and focus as you move forward with growing and expanding your reach on YouTube, which, by the way, you're doing a fabulous job. So teach us, what can we learn from you?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, YouTube for a long time was just this thing to where with my cell phone, I would share whatever God was speaking to me. And I wasn't really trying to build an audience back then. It was more of an outlet. Can I articulate what God is saying in a way? And then it could almost like a personal vlog for me to remember what he said, and I can go back and look at it. But then I began to get inspired by different other YouTube influencers, both, spirit-filled or people in just a whole different array of backgrounds, doing the things that they love and documenting it. And at the same time, I have a good friend named Eric Gilmore. He was beginning to go more from teaching into a vlog style format. So I thought, man, I really like to share with people what daily life for someone who is just full of the Spirit and hungry for more of Jesus, what would that daily life adventure look like? So we began to do vlog style videos. So our YouTube channel has the teaching videos still. We're still maintaining that. And then we're vlogging our life when we go on ministry trips or when we go down to the park with our dog. We just want to reveal what that lifestyle is like and the fact that we're real people doing life. And we've decided to add this crazy element called 3 questions, where we just have speakers and influencers in the Spirit-filled community come on the show and tell us about their books, tell us about their passion, tell us about their heart. And so it's kind of a threefold thing, just the teaching, the vlogging, and just having a wonderful guest on our show to just share their heart and to get the whole message of Kingdom family out there in that creative content.
And let's say somebody listening right now is like, oh my gosh, I want to subscribe to David on YouTube. What do they search for to find you?
It's a bit tricky because I have my avatar name as my YouTube channel. And it's linked all over the place, so I can't really change it. But it's youtube.com/DAEFIRE1. So it's Dayfire1. But if you look up David Edwards or Alicia Edwards, Lelessia, it comes right up pretty much in the top hit. Or if you type in David Edwards Revivalist, it should pop up with that keyword.
I always just search for David Edwards. I'm subscribed, but I search for your name and then you pop up at the top of the search results. So David Edwards.
It's getting better. It's getting better.
See this guy if you're watching this in video, look for his picture that will pop up and you'll know that you're in the right place. I said we weren't going to talk about books in the opening, but you're an author. You've written a number of books and would love to have you just share briefly what's your most recent book that's come out, and then what are you working on right now? I know authors are always having 1 or 2 book ideas kind of in the hopper, things they're putting together. So tell us a little bit about your writing.
Totally. Well, kind of tying into everything we just talked about and that story of just kind of understanding the supernatural and presenting it in a way that says, hey, these amazing things are for our generation. My most recent book is my first book, revised. So here it is. It's called The Call for Revivalist. So yeah, it kind of goes into everything we just talked about, following that trajectory. I'm kind of working on a project right now. I don't want to reveal the name yet, but to really tell how we reached the end of that kind of timeline to where all those things that we were praying about, we really began to see those elemental encounters. And all of a sudden we found ourselves from 2016 even to present day in the midst of these extraordinary things that are happening. And so I'm trying to get a lot of that documented. We were actually near you a few weeks ago. We were in Illinois at this church, and during worship, it sounded like a helicopter was landing on the building. And so I mentally thought, oh, it must be a train or something. And then some of the other leaders ran out the front door of the building and they were like, hey, where's the helicopter? And the people walking down the street were like, yeah, there's no helicopter here. So this amazing sound from heaven began to fill the building, so much so that you could feel the building begin to vibrate. And that was a unique thing. I'm not going to say it's me and Alicia. It's amazing when Kingdom family gathers together, how the elements themselves begin to respond. So we're trying to document some of these stories of the last 3 years and create this kind of invitation for the viewers and listeners to experience their own encounters, to understand their identity as sons and daughters in Kingdom family and what that can look like as creation is restored to the image of God.
Our focus today is just a brief interview for you all to get to know David. I know we could go down a bunch of different lanes and go deeper. So David, I'll definitely have you back in the show. I think we'll have many, many things to talk about in the coming years. But in addition to your YouTube channel, you also have a website. So where's your home base? Where can people find you on the web to learn more about your itinerant ministry work, your books, and other resources?
If you go to revivalism.net, that is our current website. We're also developing a partner website with that called kindredrevivalist.com. That'll be up and running soon. So I don't know how long this will sit on the internet, but it may switch over. So that's the place just to find out more about us, our life, our ministry, things like that. We have our YouTube channel. Right now, the best place to get our books is Amazon. If you go on Amazon and just type a search in for The Call for Revivalist or David Edwards, our page should pop up with all of our different resources.
And like we do with every episode, we'll include detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with David and pick up a copy of his book. So when you're done listening, you can head on over to ShaunTabatt.com. It'll all be linked up for you right there. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with David Edwards. Once again, if you want to connect with David, a great place to start is his website. You can find that over at revivalism.net. And David, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's been a great pleasure and an honor to finally have you on the show. It was long overdue.
Absolutely, bro. It was great. Thanks again.